helped fill the void of being mamas and sisters to me. And I just love them so much. And like I said before with Teresa, I love doing life with them. Love it. They are a group of women that are so strong. And when I feel weak, they can help hold up my hands. Aren't you glad that you have people in your life that can help hold you up when you need it? This next speaker, they're all my favorites. But she definitely is too, because she makes me laugh. She is so funny, even when she doesn't mean to be. She's so funny. And she just her spirit being around her lifts my mood and always puts me in a better place than I was before her presence arrived. She's a mama, and she is from Richmond. She's from Virginia, so she's a local Virginian. Virginian? Is that what y'all call yourselves? Put your hands together for Dawn Mast.
Because this is the truth. We fed y'all lunch, and then we want you to sit here and listen to me talk. And so I just assumed you all were going to leave. Because I got to tell you, this is siesta time at my house. This is the time we all take a nap. And this is also the sweet spot of the day at Costco, little hidden secret. I know, I got lots of Costco secrets, and you're about to be in on a couple of them. See, the morning Saturday crowd is a nightmare. That's the time that they bring out all the good little things that they let you taste. And then the late time of the day is when all of the date couples go and get the free tasting things. That's what my husband and I do. When my husband texts me from work and says, want to go on a date, I am so excited because I know we're going to Costco. Yeah. So I just assumed y'all would leave and go to Costco and, leave me talking up here by myself. But the truth of the matter is, big crowds and talking to lots of people just doesn't scare me. Like, sometimes people say to me, aren't you afraid of talking to all those people? And it just doesn't freak me out. Like, it doesn't bother me. I'm the oldest of 7 children, and then once the 7 of us grew up and got married, we thought it'd be a great idea to go and make more people. And so there are now 34 of us in my family. Yeah. So I actually am better talking to large groups of people than I am talking one-on-one. I can't, talking to people one-on-one kind of flips me out. So crowds don't bother me. It just doesn't get to me at all. But I will tell you honestly, my husband and I have 4 children, and what is often said in my house is that nobody listens to me. There's a ringing endorsement for the way you're going to spend your time the next couple of minutes. Because what often happens in our house is I say, kids, please empty the dishwasher, feed the dog, and there's some clean, because we're good people usually, but there's some clean underwear on the side table next to the front door, and so before one of the pastors comes over to visit, could you please just take it upstairs? And none of those things get done. And I get highly irritated, and I say, why didn't anybody do any of the things I asked y'all to do? And they go, oh, we didn't hear you. I heard an amen. Yeah. I'm 6 feet tall, I'm never quiet, I yell everything, and nobody heard me. On the flip side, we can be shopping somewhere, and I'm very quiet because I want to protect the feelings. I will take one of our young people and I'll say, honey, I was noticing that maybe we should probably get you some new underwear. And they're like, Mom, I can't believe you talk about my underwear in Costco. Everybody heard you. How is it that I can go from nobody heard me to everybody hears me? Well, I don't understand this. Oh, my word. Families are so interesting, are they not? And I don't know your story, I don't know, but you probably either grew up in a family, yeah, you're already laughing. You know a family, and even if you were adopted or grew up in the foster care system or something, somehow you interacted with a family at some point in your life. You didn't just fall from the sky. I don't know what you were told about how babies were born, but I'm telling you that's not how it happens. And so at some point in your life, church family, somehow a family affected you some way, somehow in your life. And then you get married and your spouse's family intertwines into your life. And so be nice. But really, that brings with it a whole different dynamic. And God does that for a reason, because there are deficits in my life that my husband and his family bring into my life. When my husband and I were first married, we had this thing where we would put a piece of paper on the kitchen counter. Whenever we discovered that we were out of something, we would just write it on the list on the kitchen counter. It's a great system. The internet wasn't invented yet. We've been married that long. And so we would write milk, bread, eggs, cheese, blah, 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 blah. And so whoever would go to the grocery store, usually me, we would take that list and we would go shopping for whatever item was needed. So one day I pick up the list and I go to the store and I'm getting all the things that are needed on the list, and I take this list and I look at it and I'm like, what in the world did the man write down? And I look at this word that he wrote down and I have no idea what he wants me to buy. And I look at this word and I look at this word and I just cannot figure it out. Now, the man's a doctor, but he actually has very, very, very good handwriting. His handwriting puts me to shame. Where are my doctor's wives at? Dentists, PAs, nurses, whatever, you medical people, y'all have my heart, because that is, the whole medical thing is messed up. It's messed up. Love you people. Anyway, he's got really good handwriting. And so, I'm looking at this list, I'm like, I have no idea what he wrote down. I don't know what he wants. I walk up and down the aisles, and what he wrote down were 4 letters. H-I-L-O. I'm like, does he want high C? We don't have children. I don't like high C. He doesn't drink high C. Do they even make high C anymore? I don't even know. So I get home, and I'm like, sugar bumpkins? What? Is high-low? Now, what you need to know is my husband grew up in Argentina. And so he sometimes forgets, and he puts things in Spanish and forgets that I don't know Spanish. My Spanish is no bueno. So he said, oh, hilo, we are out of dental floss. Well, now how am I supposed to know that hilo is Spanish for string and that we were out of dental floss? But growing up, that's what his family did. They call it hilo, so he just assumed that I would know that we were out of hilo. Needless to say, my teeth did not get flossed that day. But that's how his family did, and families are funny. My family is the I love you family. And what I mean by that is my mother says I love you every 5.7 seconds. I grew up knowing that I was loved every 5.7 seconds. I knew I was loved. But my mom just has to say it often. We could be at the dinner table or in the living room, and mom would be like, and someone would get up to go someplace, and mom would say, where are you going? I'm just going to the bathroom. Okay, I love you. like, she's going to the bathroom. We sure are gonna miss her. She'd knock on the door halfway through. I love you. I'm coming out. My husband's family, on the other hand, he grew up knowing he was loved. He knew it. He knew he was loved, but his family would need to say it every 5 minutes. One night I walked in and he was on the phone talking, on the phone. He hangs up the phone and said, "Oh, who was that?" He said, "Oh, it was my dad. I just called to wish him happy birthday." I said, "That's kind of weird because you didn't say you loved him when you hung up." He said, "Yeah, I did." I said, "Bye, Pops." That's not how we do it in my family. You're about 17, I love you is behind. But families are funny, and they're fascinating, and the dynamic of why this family does this way, and why the family over here does this way, and that way, is just mind-boggling, isn't it? And what I get caught up in is, I look at this family and I go, oh, why doesn't my family look like that family? Why am I not doing it like her family? Their family is so perfect. Oh, I want to be godly like their family. I'm not godly enough like their family. Their family's going to get to heaven first. They're going to get all the good mansions. These are the thoughts that go through my head. Please don't tell anybody I said this. It's embarrassing. And the worst thing I think was last month when the Christmas cards start rolling in, this is what happens. We start to look at these cards and we realize we have a snippet of these families and we say, look how perfect their families are. Look how amazing and perfect. I want my family to look like their family. They must not have alcoholics, and they must not fight, and they must not have dirty clothes and dirty homes and wayward children, and the list goes on and on and on. And we lie to ourselves and we tell each other that. Am I right? And we start the comparison game. I do it. I will tell you, in November, I had our family go and stand in a cold, cold field on a breezy afternoon and take a family photo. And they were thrilled about it. They said, "Thanks, Mom." And I had to put on matchy-matchy clothes. And our boys came home. They're students up at Liberty University. Any Liberty peeps here? Woo! More Liberty people than doctor people. That's amazing. Good for you. And so our boys are students at Liberty, so I have a really hard time nailing them down and getting them to commit to come home. And I, as a mom, I needed my kids home, and I just said, we are going to take a family picture, and you're going to smile, and you're going to look happy. And they did. And so this is a picture that came out of that. Got a shot of that? We're going to get the picture? Yeah, there's our picture. Yeah. And I will tell you, it is not easy to get 6 human beings in a German Shepherd. She's a German Shepherd, but she leaves hair everywhere, so I call her German Shepherd. Where's my friend who wanted me to say that? Where is she? Where is she? Right here. Debbie, where are you? Right here. Oh, there you are, sweetie. Hi. Yeah, it is not easy to get 6 people in a German Shepherd to do that. And then the photographer, she's a Russian lady, she's the sweetest thing. She says, I want to get one, let's get one of the 4 kids. So she took this shot of the 4 kids. Yeah, that's good. That was awesome. Yeah. Oh, that's the one that was supposed to come next, sorry. It's that one. Yeah. She took a picture of the 4 kids. And people, and we put the 2 good pictures, those 2, on our Christmas cards, and people text me and go, your family's so beautiful, your family's so perfect, your family's so nice, you're married to a doctor, your life's supposed to be so amazing. And it's good, I am blessed. I don't mean to minimize that. We are so blessed. But I think what people see is people were seeing a 4x6 or a 3x5 snapshot of our lives on one little afternoon. The photographer said afterwards, she said, I took 100 photos of your family and I got like one good one. It's like, thanks for that. Now let me show you the outtakes. Okay, you saw the one already. The boys tried to drop their sister. Can we go back to that one? They tried to drop, yeah, there's that. Yep. That was that. Now, they said they were going to take a picture of the three brothers. There's that one. And you can tell it just starts to fall apart from here. Yeah, it starts to go unwell. And then it all just kind of falls apart. And then we have that. Yeah. This is what we deal with. But see, I think what's helpful is we have an entire book of Jesus' family picture. It is not perfect, y'all. See, our Savior had a family that was incredibly broken and so messed up and so full of the most ridiculous stories that you can imagine. You know, if you look at Matthew 1:1, they have the whole lineage there, and you can look at it. It has all of the timeline and storyline of Jesus' family. List all the names. Not a one of them was perfect. Those folks had ridiculous stories. The first one I want to talk about is Tamar. If you want to talk about her, she's in Genesis 38:11 through 19. This is how far I have to back up to read the notes. Isn't that good? And if you want to have a little backstory, you know, it's Abraham
11.
and Isaac. And Isaac had Jacob, and Jacob, Joseph. Joseph was a guy, he has a pretty good integrity. You know, Joseph was doing all right. But he had this brother. You know, there's a stinker in every crowd. And Joseph had a brother, Judah. And Judah was a mess. And we can read about the story of Judah and Tamar in Genesis 38. I'm a mom, so I love to read stories, and I'll read to you. Genesis 38:11 through 19 says, Judah then said to his daughter-in-law Tamar, live as a widow in your father's house until my son Shelah grows up. See, his son was married to Tamar, but then his son died. And so she just had this desire to be married again. So he had promised his son, who was too young to marry, that she could marry Tamar. Live as a widow in your father's house until my son Shelah grows up. And for he thought he may die too, just like his brothers. Now there's some positive thinking. So Tamar went to live in her father's house. And after a long time, Judah's wife, the daughter of Shua, died. And when Judah had recovered from his grief, he went up to Timnah, to the men who were shearing his sheep. And his friend Hira, the Adulamite, went with him. When Tamar was told, your father-in-law is on his way to Timnah to shear his sheep, she took off her widow's clothes and covered herself with a veil to disguise herself, and then she sat down at the entrance of Anaim, which is on the road to Timnah. For she saw that through Shelah was now grown up, she had not been given to him as his wife. When Judah saw her, he thought she was a prostitute, for she had covered her face. Not realizing that she was his daughter-in-law, he went over to her by the roadside and said, come now, let me sleep with you. What will you give me to sleep with you, she asked. I'll send you a young goat for my flock, he said. Will you give me something as a pledge until you send it? She asked. He said, what pledge should I give you? Your seal and its cord and the staff in your hand, she answered. And so he gave them to her and slept with her, and she became pregnant by him. And after she left, she took off her veil and put on her widow's clothes again. We're going to jump ahead to verses 24 through 30. And that tells us about 3 months later, Judah was told, your daughter-in-law Tamar is guilty of prostitution and as a result is now pregnant. Judah said, bring her out and have her burned to death. As she was being brought out, she sent a message to her father-in-law. I'm pregnant by the man who owns these, she said. And she added, see if you recognize whose seal and cord and staff these are. Boom. Judah recognized them and said, "She's more righteous than I am, since I wouldn't give her my son Shelah," and he did not sleep with her again. When the time came for her to give birth, there were twin boys in her womb. And as she was giving birth, one of them put out his hand. So the midwife took a scarlet thread and tied it on his wrist and said, "This one came out first." But when he drew back his hand, his brother came out. And she said, "So this is how you have broken out." And he was named Perez. And then his brother, who had the scarlet thread on his wrist, came out. And he was given the name Zerah. Tamar had a promise broken by a family member. And if you've ever had a promise broken to you, you know how incredibly painful that is. And I'm not talking about a promise like, okay, I'll save the last week of chocolate cake for you. And then you can be like, okay, can't wait to go home and put on the stretch pants, eat the chocolate cake. No, this was a big deal. She was promised a man that she could marry and not have to go through the rest of her life alone. And she was lied to. So she took matters into her own hands and said, well, fine then. I'll sleep with him and get pregnant and have these boys. And she did. Now, Rahab had a different approach, but see, the thing is, Tamar and Rahab are both in the lineage of Jesus. And the fascinating thing about both these women is Rahab also prostitution in her past. The interesting thing about Rahab is, if you read the commentary about her, she was called a harlot. Very strong word, very strong word. And what that meant is, that was her job. Can you imagine? What that meant is, she had no choice. She was so poor. She was forced into prostitution because her family had no option. That's how poor she was. She couldn't go to a local university and become a CEO or anything. She couldn't become a brain surgeon or a nurse or a teacher or anything else. She had to be a prostitute if she wanted to live. This poor girl. She was doing the best she could. And we can read her story in Joshua 2:1. And Joshua 2:1 talks about how the spies came to her and they just needed a place to hide. And you can judge Rahab all you want. But what we read about her in Joshua 2:1, the spies come to her. And one of the other things we see about her is she just didn't tell the truth. When it came to, have you seen where these men went? She's like, haven't seen a thing. Nope. I haven't seen any spies today. That was kind of her attitude. But if we read Joshua 2:1, it says, "Then Joshua, son of Nun, secretly sent 2 spies from Shittim. Go look over the land, especially Jericho. So they went and entered the house of a prostitute named Rahab and stayed there. And the king of Jericho was told, look, some of the Israelites have come here tonight to spy out the land. So the king of Jericho sent this message to Rahab. Bring out the men who came to you and entered your house, because they have come to spy out the whole land." But the woman who had taken the 2 men and hidden them, she said, "Yes, the men came to me, but I did not know where they had come from. And at dusk, when it was time to close the city gate, the men left, and I don't know which way they went. Go after them quickly, you may catch up with them." But she had taken them up to the roof and hidden them under the stalks of flax that she had laid out on the roof. And so the men set on pursuit of the spies on the road that leads to the fords of Jordan. And as soon as the pursuers had gone out, the gate was shut. And where her family comes in is fascinating in verses 12 and 13. See, Rahab's mindset was on her family, and the spies knew it, and they mention it. In verses 12 and 13, she says, "Now then, please swear to me by the Lord that you will show kindness to my family, because I have shown kindness to you." And she had hidden them. She had spared their lives. "Give me a sure sign that you will spare the lives of my father and mother, my brother and sisters, and all who belong to them, and that you will save us from death." There was some heavy stuff going down, and she knew that the city was going to be under siege. She did not want her family to be a part of it. And finally, the men say in verses 17, "This oath you made us swear will not be binding on us, unless when we enter the land you tie the scarlet cord in the window through which you let us down, And unless you had brought your father and your mother and your brother and all your family into your house, knowing that they were safe. See, the fascinating thing about this is there's a scarlet cord in Tamar's story and a scarlet cord in Rahab's story. Both of these non-Israelite women, both in the lineage of Jesus, and both with a scarlet cord. The scarlet cord is representative of blood, the color red. And who is to come along generations and generations and generations later but their relative Jesus, who's going to shed his blood on the cross for things like the sins that they had had in their family. Do you see the connection? Do you get how powerful that is? Things like lying and prostitution and wars that take down cities and all those sorts of things that they were having to deal with. That's what their relative years later was coming to do. They didn't know it then, but God knew it then. And he saw the whole thing. And it's totally unbelievable. Tamar had a promise broken, but here Rahab's story was about a promise that was kept. Because later in Joshua we see that her family was one of this family, and not the only family that was spared when the walls came down. That is powerful. It's also a promise that God will keep his promises. The last one we talk about is Mary. You can't talk about Jesus and his family without talking about Mary. And I looked around and I read and I thought, wow, I wonder what the last conversation Jesus ever had with his mom. You know, I have kiddos, and you know, my conversations with my boys are very different from my conversation with my girl. But I wonder what the last time Scripture indicated that Jesus talked to his mama. And the only thing I could find was the wedding at Cana. Now maybe he stopped by his mom's house sometime and she fixed him some hummus and falafel. I don't know what he was behind him. I don't know. It's better than Cheetos and Mountain Dew. But this is the other thing. Mary is the only person who had the privilege of seeing Jesus take his first breath and his last. Gather that in your head for a moment. Joseph was dead, or at least they don't mention that he was at the crucifixion. His mama was the only person that God allowed to see him both be born and die. That is a big deal. And so when we read about the wedding at Cana in John 2, 1 through 5, it's a fascinating interaction between mother and son. And what happens here is almost like how I almost want to see my interaction with the Lord. It says, on the third day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "Have no more wine." "Dear woman, why do you involve me?" Jesus replied, "My time has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." And some very interesting things about this interaction. In one translation I read, Jesus just said to his mother, "Woman." I don't know about you, if my kids ever called me woman, that's not good. But apparently that was a term of endearment in that culture. So he got away with it. Well, he was also Jesus, so he got away with it. But what's the big deal? Like, why should Mary care? Like, when you go to a wedding and they run out of something, if you're just a guest who RSVPs, yes, so many people are coming, why do you care if they run out of things at the wedding? Do you really care? Okay, if they run out of cake, it's a big deal. I'm taking my gift and I'm going home. But what this tells us is that Mary must have been directly related to the wedding party. She was an aunt, something. She had to be directly related, because she must have been doing something. She must have been some sort of caterer. She must have been in charge somehow. And they probably said, Aunt Mary, could you please make sure all the wine decanters are filled? And she was like, yes, my lady. That's Downton Abbey. Sorry. I have the Downton Abbey version of the Bible. It was next to the Message version, and I thought that was more interesting. So anyway, I don't know what her answer was, but basically she said, agreed to be in charge of the wine, which tells us that she was a relative. She somehow was related to them. And she runs to Jesus and she says, they're out of wine. And see, this is what struck me. Do I do that with him? Do I run to him and say, Jesus, this is what's going on in my life. I need you to fix this, do this. There's something's going down, and I need... Because the great thing about this interchange is she's a little panicked. Like, you can kind of hear it in her voice, and the first person she goes to is him. She goes to him and says, you need to fix this. That's kind of what she is implying. Like, you need to make this right. And he is so calm about it because that's who he is. He doesn't freak out about anything. Typical man. Always calm. But he doesn't. He's so calm. He's like, woman, I got this. That is so beautiful. And so I read that and I thought, that's Jesus. That's what I want to do when I take him my serious, painful, awful issues. And I'm at the edge of myself. And I want to be able to just to say, I need you to do something. This is beyond what I can handle. And I want to be able to hear him say, woman, I got it. I got this. The other fascinating thing about this is, I don't know what happened, and I wish that it would tell us in detail what happened, what he said, but you can almost see her. She just goes to the disciples and goes, do whatever he tells you. There was obviously some interchange between here and here, but we're not really privy to that. But apparently, like, he said something amazing that just made her go, do whatever he tells you. Ask no questions. And then boom, wine shows up. Families. Fascinating, weird. Sometimes weird and fascinating. And sometimes the new generations in our families are going to repeat the same sins and problems and patterns of old generations. Do they not? I'm serious. Like, we look at Abraham and Isaac. Abraham, God loved Abraham. Like, you sometimes get a little jealous when you read this story, and it's like, I'm pretty sure God loved Abraham more than he loves me. Like, and David, don't even get me started on David. It's like, you just want to go to God and go, you know all the stupid stuff David did, and you still said he was after your heart? Look at all the good stuff I did. But here Abraham told Pharaoh that his wife was his sister. What did Abraham's son do? But one generation later, the same stupid thing. And it happens over and over and over again in our own families. And I see it in my family. My grandma was a sweet lady. She had such a critical spirit. She could make food like crazy, but her spirit was just she was very prickly. That's what I can describe her. She's kind of a prickly person. She felt like, people give me backhanded compliments. Like, just, oh. And then, like, did she just say something mean to me? But also compliment at the same time, oh. I just loved her. And you have to make that conscious effort to break those things. And y'all, it is so hard. And we can't do it in our own humanness. And do you know the word heirloom? Grandma makes the quilt, and then it's passed down and passed down anything passed down from generation to generation to generation to generation is your heirloom. And some of it is awesome. My mom has a diamond necklace that I kind of have my eye on. I'm just saying. Grandma's critical spirit needs to stop here with the diamond necklace. I kind of want it. Some of it's good. the grandma's quilting and creativity and, homemade pies, all that stuff is good. But some of the things are not good. And we can stop the generational ick with our generation, with the Lord's help. Amen? Amen. And I don't know your situation. I have no idea. I got my own stuff going on with, it's gone. But those people, I got my own stuff. When my husband and I got married, we got a lot of really nice wedding gifts. One of the things we got was this, it was a big metal wreath. Like, I'm probably exaggerating, but that really makes the best story. Exaggeration also is an heirloom that gets passed down. It was a big metal wreath, like 5 feet, no, it was like this big, and it was blue, like a neon blue. And it said, welcome, in big letters at the bottom. And in the middle was a big cat head. I'm not even joking. I wish I was joking. And I'm a dog person, so it wasn't funny. It was like Hello Kitty, actually, is what it was. And I was like, I am not passing this on to our children someday. And we unloaded that thing as far and as fast away from the people who gave it to us. But I was thinking, there are heirlooms that we kind of just instinctively hang on our hearts, kind of like that wreath. They don't belong there. They do not belong there. And you can refuse to hang generational sin and all that stuff that gets passed down from your grandpas and your mamas and your whatevers. You can refuse it. You can say, Lord, there is no room for that on my heart. You can picture it as that ugly Hello Kitty wreath if it helps you. Because you will dismiss that thing fast, so fast. I'm going to end with this. I love this. Paul writes in Timothy 2, 1 through 3, and this is so good because see, this shows us that what we do today impacts generation. It doesn't matter if you're 100 years old or 10 years old. What you do today is impacting who you interact with in your family. Do you get that? But 2 Timothy says in chapter 1, verses 3 through 5, I thank God, whom I serve with a pure conscience. Let all the ick go. As my forefathers did, as without ceasing, I remember you in my prayers day and night, greatly desiring to see you being mindful of your tears. All that pain, all that stuff, let it go. And I may be filled with joy when I call to remembrance the genuine faith that is in you. You have genuine faith in Christ. You've worked so hard for that. Which dwelt first in your grandmother Lois, I don't know if her grandmother's name is Lois, and in your mother Eunice, and in persuaded in you also. Your family has passed down some amazing good things. Hold on to that. But the stuff that is no good, dismiss it. Let it go. Dump it overboard. The one thing that God impressed on my heart, which brought me, absolutely just undid me, as I was going through scripture and preparing this, was one phrase. And it was, Jesus does not call us to look like our family. He wants us to look like the Father. Jesus does not call us to look like our family. He wants us to look like our Father. Your family may be beautiful and wonderful and maybe be funny and make the best, I don't know, sloppy joes, barbecue, whatever, and that may be great. And you can delight in that. Remember, from the captivity in Babylon until Jesus was born was 14 generations. You may be in the middle of a generation that's just going through some horrible stuff. You may be in that 13th generation. Hang on. I encourage you, hang on. You may say, you know what, my family has always, and fill in the blank, you know that blank, My family's always been alcoholics. My family's always been horse thieves. Well, horse thieves don't do that anymore. My family's always been thieves. My family's always been poor. My family's always been liars. My family's always been whatever. You have that, you know what goes in that blank. I know what goes in my blank. I need a couple blanks. You know what goes in the blank. It doesn't have to be that way anymore. So as we quiet our hearts right now, this is the end, I promise. And as we gather to pray, I'm going to ask that God helps us focus on his promise in 1 John 3:1-3. This is so good. It says, how great is the love of the Father. He has lavished on us that we should be called what? Children of God. Go back to being a kid. How cool is that? And that is what we are. The word lavish means luxurious and deluxe. You get the 5-star treatment. Soak it up. So we are done, and if we need, we can pray for you. Because this is the time to pray for your family. This is the time to wrap up our time together. What a blessing it's been to spend a cold January day inside of the warmth with you. I hope you feel like it's time well spent.